at the University of North Texas. He holds a PhD from University of Iowa and a MA from Columbia University, both in religious studies. His BE was in computer science from Karnataka University. Professor Jain has over 25 years of experience both in industry and academia. He is currently working on his fourth monograph, Modern Jainism, a historical approach, co-editing the Encyclopedia of Hinduism and a volume of Indian and Western philosophical concepts in religion. He compiled Jains and Hindus' history in America for his third monograph, that is, Dharma in America, a short history of Hindu-Jain diaspora. He is also the author of award-winning Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities, Sustenance and Sustainability, and Social and Religious Revolution in India, Moving the Mountains. His articles have appeared in several academic journals, including his publications in daily newspapers like the Washington Post and the Times of India. He was interviewed by the New York Times in 2019 and was also interviewed by Morgan Freeman for a Netflix series, The Story of God. His episode on Jainism is available in the season 3 of the series. He's a recipient of the Fulbright Nehru Fellowship Award for Environmental Leadership and a Wiener Green Grant, amongst the many others. So I enthusiastically welcome Professor Jain to give us a talk on the topic of climate change and climate engineering from the Indic perspectives. A very warm welcome to you, Professor Jain.
Thank you, Professor Sani. Thank you, Shruti, for this gracious welcome and introduction. It's a huge topic. The time is very limited, as always, but I'll try to do my best to give you as much information as possible. Like Professor Sani said, climate change is still a relatively new topic for India. But we don't just have to talk about climate change. We have to withstand, tolerate, mitigate, live with climate change every day. Even this zoonotic pandemic that we are all in, COVID, is a reflection of climate change from my perspective. It's a huge, huge topic. But so without further ado, probably I'll just start reading my paper. It was published very recently. I also shared the paper beforehand just to make things easy for you. Google Meet remains a bit new for me. Zoom is much more common, but I'll try my best. Let's see. I'll share my presentation and then I'll read my paper. So I think I can. Can you see my screen now? This Google Meet is still okay. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, the PowerPoint. You can see the PowerPoint. All right. And I don't mind if you have any question. If you can raise, and I'll try my best to even while I'm talking, I can take the questions. This is now I've been doing this work for last more than 15 years, so everything is part of my DNA now. All this studies from Indic perspective. So climate change. So there are three things I think broadly speaking. Before I start reading the paper, I'll just introduce for the students especially. The first thing is that environmental problems, right? Environmental issues. Now, environmental issues are so many: loss of biodiversity, pollution, and on and on. Climate change is a very relatively new term, but it means that our climate changes, extreme heat, extreme cold, and all that. Now, so scientists have now concluded that this is beyond tipping point, and we can do nothing about climate change. Ye hona hi hai. What the best we can do is now climate engineering. So let's do something to mitigate the climate change. Climate change is already happening. तो उसके लिए क्या करें कि क्लाइमेट चेंज के इफेक्ट से बचें हम. तो उसमें दो मेन कैटेगरीज आती हैं. क्लाइमेट इंजीनियरिंग जब बात करते हैं हम, तो देयर आर टू मेन टॉपिक्स विद इन दैट. फर्स्ट इज कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड रिमूवल फ्रॉम क्लाइमेट. द सेकंड इज सोलर रेडिएशन मैनेजमेंट. ठीक है. So these are the two major categories within the climate engineering. That is what I'm going to describe, especially from Indic perspective. Let me now start reading the paper. So, with countless localized practices in different languages and customs, Hinduism is one of the most diverse religious and cultural traditions. Amidst its staggering diversity, we can still observe some key concepts and principles that are accepted and practiced by many Hindus for the past several millennia in India. And now across the world. Hindu diaspora is across the world. Indian diaspora is the largest in the world, by the way, just for information. So Hindus and Jains and Buddhists, Indians in general, are spread across the world in huge quantity across the world. So Hindu values they're also taking across the world. So in this section, in the first section of this paper, I explore some of what can be some agreeable ideas among Hindus of different castes and classes, as well as some Buddhists and Jain ideas that compare well with their Hindu counterparts and how they relate with the climate and nature studies in general. So first idea is that many Hindu sacred texts, including the Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, Sutras, and Agamas, have references that suggest that the earth Bhudevi is one of the mother goddess to be revered and thanked for all her bounties with which she nourishes us. That's the first idea. So let me show you that screen. Reverence for nature, reverence for the universe, really. So that is the first idea. Let me make it full screen. Yes. Right. So reverence for nature. The reference suggests that the earth is a creation and abode of the divine, making it divine. Buddhist texts such as Avatansaka Sutra indicate that the universe is a jewel net of Indra, with each particle teeming with the Buddha nature, which in turn is divine. Similarly, Jain texts such as Jiva Vichar Prakaranam, written by Shanti Suri in the 11th century, describes air bodies, fire bodies, water bodies, earth bodies, plants, and all the other living beings as beings alive with soul. So we must practice non-violence towards every creature on the earth. So everything is divine, everything is living, everything is divine. From Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain perspective. Second major idea, almost all the Indian indigenous languages, including Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, all Marathi, Hindi, Bengali, every Indian language, almost every Indian language has the word dharma. Dharma means duty, virtue, natural law, religion, physical property or physical characteristic, ethical principle, and sustaining force. In the last few decades, various scholars have interpreted dharma to define it as our responsibility towards nature and the earth. So in my own book, for example, let me show you the cover of that book. So in my own book, what I argue is that since dharma is coming from the root dhri, which means to sustain. So sustain automatically connects with sustainability and sustenance. So dharma is not just religion, dharma is not just ethical values. Dharma inherently includes the values of sustainability, because dharma means to sustain, and sustainability is all about sustaining the universe, sustaining our society, and so on. So dharma inherently is sustainability and sustenance. That's what I argue in my own book, which came more than a decade back. Then third idea is that the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain texts accept that we have to deal with the consequences of our action. That is karma. So dharma, so first was reverence for nature, then dharma, and then the karma. Now this karmic theory should be the guiding principle in all our interactions with all the beings and resources in nature. This theory is one of the reasons that many Jains, Buddhists, and Hindus do not accept meat in their staple diet. That in turn keeps their carbon footprint one of the lowest in the world. Like in many developing countries, Indian policymakers are also trying to industrialize their economies, causing increasing burdens on India's natural resources. But the low meat consumption within India is a unique characteristic of this modernizing country compared to other developing or developed countries. Fourth idea, Hinduism reveres the 5 great elements, Panch Mahabhutas, space, air, fire, water, and earth, right? So nature, both outside of the human body and inside, is interwoven, interdependent, and interconnected based on these 5 elements. The most extended Hindu epic text, the Mahabharata, describes how these elements develop from each other and ultimately from Brahman, the supreme reality. So from Brahman arises space, from space arises air, from air arises fire, from fire arises water, and from water arises earth. So all of these Panch Mahabhutas are interconnected. Like the outside nature, the human senses also relate with the corresponding element. Nose with earth, tongue with water, eyes with fire, skin with air, and ears with space. This relationship between our bodies and the elements defines our relationship with the environment. Jainism, similarly, as mentioned above, refers to the 4 elements, fire, air, water, and earth, as fire bodies, air bodies, water bodies, and earth bodies, alive with soul, thus worthy of our non-violence and non-compassion. Let me show you the relevant screen, good karma, and then Panch Mahabhutas. Yes, so I'm here right now. All right. Yes, so these above mentioned Indic teachings can help inspire contemporary policymakers in India and elsewhere to deal with climate change and other environmental threats. Climate engineering is about human intervention into at least 3 of these great elements, the fire, the air, and the earth. In the next section, we explore this intervention from a Hindu perspective. So now we see the climate engineering. What is climate engineering, which is even more new term. So climate engineering from Hindu legends and myths. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, the scientific body of the United Nations with a mandate to study climate change, defines climate engineering as deliberately altering the climate system to counter climate change. Right? So in October 2018, IPCC released its special report about the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Immediately after that, Green Faith, an interfaith organization in New Jersey actually, dealing with environmental and climate issues, published an edited volume on religious responses to climate engineering. In his foreword to the edited volume, Green Faith's executive director, Reverend Fletcher Harper, highlighted a caveat in this report. According to the scientific consensus, the only way to limit climate change is through climate engineering's negative emission techniques that will remove carbon dioxide from the planet's atmosphere and will reduce the amount of sunlight reaching Earth. Like many other writers, Harper expressed concern for messing with natural world. The very title of this volume warns about playing God. From a Hindu perspective, climate engineering seems to be dealing with some of the five great elements. Broadly speaking, out of the five great elements, carbon dioxide removal, CDR, is about managing the air and the earth, and solar radiation management, SRM, is about managing the sun. CDR techniques involve removing the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases from the ocean and the land, and CDR techniques include using the bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, using charcoal for agricultural purposes, ocean fertilization, enhanced weathering, and direct air capture. Primarily in this presentation, I will refer CDR to mean only carbon dioxide removal instead of discussing the different ways scientists have suggested to accomplish this removal. Unlike CDR, SRM technologies are intended not to mitigate or sequester greenhouse gas emissions, but are supposed to reflect the sunlight and thus control global warming. The means to reflect the sunlight are of various kinds, such as painting roof materials in light colors, employing reflective plastic sheets on deserts, pumping colder water to the Arctic sea surfaces, spraying seawater in the atmosphere to increase the reflectivity of clouds, injecting reflective aerosols into the atmosphere, and placing mirrors orbiting around the Earth. I will use the term SRM to mean simply solar radiation management instead of discussing various means scientists have suggested for this management. I hope this is clear. I've read a lot of things. Let me explain a little bit. So climate engineering, if you take a look at this slide, so what is happening is that if you see this aeroplane here, this aircraft, right? So that aircraft is throwing these aerosols in the air, so that when extreme sunlight is coming to the Earth, this aerosol or the chemical will reflect the sunlight back to sun. So it will stop the sunlight from reaching the Earth because to control the global warming, right? Then cloud seeding, so creating artificial clouds to reflect the sunlight back to sun. So instead of letting it reach to the Earth, again to control the global warming. Similarly, if you see these green trees here, so increasing afforestation or reforestation to capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Similarly, CO2 air capture, similar idea. CO2 storage in the ocean, similar idea. So idea is to जो extra CO2 हो गई है एटमॉस्फेयर में आ गई है कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड, उसको किस तरह से रिमूव करना है, एब्जॉर्ब करना है. तरीके उसके बहुत सारे हो सकते हैं. एयर कैप्चर कर लें, या पेड़ ज्यादा लगाएं, या जो सनलाइट जो आ रही है आसमान से उसको किस तरह से रिफ्लेक्ट करके वापस भेज दें एटमॉस्फेयर में. So these are some of the techniques for climate engineering that I will be discussing more in this paper. So this is another slide in which we say same idea. So capture the CO2 by increasing afforestation, more trees to capture the extra CO2, or the solar radiation management, SRM, to reflect the sunlight back into the space. These are the major two categories by which we want to control the climate change, because climate change means what? More greenhouse gas emissions, more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which are causing the global warming. Because of the greenhouse gases, the sunlight is captured within the Earth, and because of the increasing sunlight, the global warming is happening. So to reduce that, उसको कैसे कम करें? तो sunlight जो आ रही है आसमान से, सूरज से, उसको वापस भेज दें अगर, तो global warming कम होगी. So that is how we are going to mitigate climate change. That is how we want to mitigate global warming. We can now let's come to the Indic ideas. What can be the Indic approach towards climate change and climate engineering, to be more specific. All right, so let's read now the paper again. So going further, as discussed, while CDR is about cleaning out the toxic elements from the planet that humans put out in the first place, SRM is about controlling the solar energy for planetary sustenance. There are various Hindu legends in which demons, the negative forces, asuras, are conquered by divine forces, devas. Below, I have picked one such legend that comes close to the way we are now trying to deploy CDR for the cleansing of some of the toxicity that we have created in the recent past. In this Hindu legend, Hindu legend, the Asura force is also created first by mistake, and then a specific power is needed to correct this mistake. On the other hand, SRM aims to manipulate the sun, and there is at least one Hindu legend that is about deflecting the sunlight, as I described below, to explore if and how we can interpret CDR and SRM from Hindu perspectives using two of the famous legends as described in different Hindu texts. Now, Hindu legend of Mahishasor, as mentioned in many Hindu texts, can be a helpful way to understand CDR from a Hindu perspective. Like everybody knows Mahishasur's story. I don't have to repeat, but in summary, Mahishasur gained a near immortality boon after a long penance. No male could kill him ever. After he attained this boon, he turned into a demon and started using his power to destroy the world. Right? So all the gods come together and created Mahishasur Mardini, a new form of the goddess Durga. This new form eventually killed the demon and saved the world. Okay? Applying this dichotomy, Mahishasur represents human fallibility. Right? All the negativity that humans might have can be iconified in Mahishasur, whereas Mahishasur Mardini, the goddess, represents the human capability. How can we fight with the problem? How can we come together and create something new that will take care of our own problems? We created Mahishasur. Now let's create Mahishasur Mardini and deal with Mahishasur. That is my hypothesis, basically, summarizing. So in other words, humans need to stop playing God because of our imperfection. Imperfection hai, if we try to play God, we will create more Mahishasurs. So climate change is one of the examples of Mahishasur. At the same time, arguably, humans need to continue devising new ways to correct their past mistakes, as long as the new methods are responsible, sustainable, and ethical. Can we create new Mahishasur Mardini? Mahishasur to humne bana diya, lekin Mahishasur Mardini hum bana sakte hain kya? Ye prashn hai. This is the question that we are dealing with. So the demonic force, in this case CDR, can be compared with the toxic greenhouse gases that were created by humans by their reckless actions over the past couple of centuries, as we know. Because humans created the problems, it is humans that must now come up with a solution that will correct their own wrongdoings. Just as a boon first created the demon and another intervention later removed it. CDR seems to compare well with the idea of human response to take care of a reckless demonic force, a new kind of Mahishasur. In the last couple of centuries, we achieved a lot of scientific and technological progress across the world, almost like a boon that was supposed to grant us all kinds of happiness, right? Sadly, so industrial revolution or modernity, it came with a promise that sabko sukhi kar dega or sabhi khushiyan baantega, lekin it ended up being a Mahishasur in the form of climate change or loss of biodiversity or environmental issues. Sadly, this boon has also brought us the new bane of the existential threat for the planet in the form of climate change. Since our reckless use of environmental resources was a mistake, we now need to develop new ways to correct our past error, and CDR is one of those ways. Like Mahishasur, greenhouse gases will remain immoral unless we develop new panacea to remove them from the planet forever. Let me show you that screen for Mahishasur Mardini. Yes. All right. So also like Mahishasur, greenhouse gases present a similar existential threat for us, and only new solutions such as CDR can save us from this threat. However, the analogy must stop there, and there should not be any new reverence for any new technological solution. एक इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन या मॉडर्निटी को हम ऑलरेडी गॉड मान चुके थे, साइंस को गॉड माना, बहुत लोगों ने रिलीजन माना, उससे बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स ही खड़ी हुई. तो ऐसा नहीं हो कि क्लाइमेट इंजीनियरिंग एक अलग नया गॉड के रूप में उभरे, लेकिन उससे प्रॉब्लम ज्यादा हो. Right? So what I'm saying is it was our blind reverence for science and technology that gave us new problems such as climate change. We should use CDR or any new technology with the utmost responsibility and care, not blind faith. So we should not revere CDR like the Hindu goddess who kills Mahishasur in the Hindu mythology. Similarly, SRM can be compared with an incident mentioned in the Mahabharata, the largest Hindu text, the longest Hindu text, right? Mahabharata, everybody knows, which describes a great war between two groups of cousins, Pandavas and Kauravas. In the 89th chapter of his retelling of the Mahabharata epic, on the 14th day of the war, Chakravarti Rajgopalachari describes the slaying of one of the villains, Jayadratha, by one of the heroes, Arjuna, with the help of Lord Krishna. So Jayadratha was, कौन जयद्रथ था? जयद्रथ जिसने अभिमन्यु की हत्या की थी, अभिमन्यु का वध किया था, चक्रव्यूह जिसने तोड़ा था, राइट? तो अब अर्जुन ये प्रतिज्ञा लेता है कि अगले दिन सूर्यास्त से पहले जयद्रथ का वो वध करेगा. अगर नहीं कर पाया अर्जुन जयद्रथ का वध तो आत्मदाह कर लेगा, राइट? और सूर्यास्त होने वाला है, तो कृष्ण क्या करते हैं, अपनी माया से सूर्यास्त कर देते हैं थोड़ी देर के लिए, और जयद्रथ को लगता है कि सूर्यास्त हो गया और वो खुशी खुशी चिल्लाने लगता है खुशी से. इतने में अर्जुन तुरंत उसका वध करता है और इस तरह से अपनी प्रतिज्ञा पूरी करता है. ये जयद्रथ की कहानी है महाभारत में, ठीक है? At that point in the war, Krishna stopped the sunlight and created an illusion of sunset that made one of the villains, Jayadratha, come out from hiding and then be quickly killed by the hero Arjuna. Perhaps we can compare the problem of climate change with this villain. Hopefully, as SRM techniques try to control the sun for a short period, we will use that period to work in unison with a similar urgency to deal with the root cause of the problem of climate change, and we'll deal with it forever. The analogy from the Hindu story is identical, only in the way. 1 second. Yeah, so that's the Jayadratha episode in the Mahabharata, right? So SRM should also be used with utmost care and responsibility instead of blind faith. Like any solution or instrument that helps to fix a problem, technological solutions such as CDR and SRM should be deployed for particular purposes so as not to cause further side effects. तो जैसे अर्जुन ने तुरंत वध कर दिया था उतनी देर में, जितनी देर में सूरज को ढका था माया से कृष्ण ने, हमको भी शायद अगर हमको सनलाइट अगर रिफ्लेक्ट करनी है तो उतनी ही देर में अर्जेंटली हमको एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज की रूट कॉज को डील करना पड़ेगा. अदरवाइज साइड इफेक्ट्स होते रहेंगे, हम कुछ केमिकल इंजेक्ट करेंगे एटमॉस्फेयर में, सनलाइट को रिफ्लेक्ट करेंगे, लेकिन उन केमिकल्स का साइड इफेक्ट्स वो कौन डील करेगा? हमारे मॉनसून पैटर्न अगर चेंज हो गया और अगर ड्राउट आने लगा इंडिया या अफ्रीका में, तो उसको कौन कैसे हम सॉल्व करेंगे? तो और प्रॉब्लम्स खड़ी नहीं हो जाए. दैट इज व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू आर्ग्यू इन दिस पेपर, इन दिस प्रेजेंटेशन. फ्रॉम हिंदू पर्सपेक्टिव, as long as the focus is maintained to defeat the demonic forces leading to climate change, a temporary quick fix in the form of CDR and SRM techniques can be adopted with all the caveats and considerations outlined below based on Indic virtues and ideas such as karma, ahimsa, sannyasa, and vinay. The rest of this presentation will make several references to vegetarianism, a prime example from Indic perspectives based on these Indic virtues. So what I'm arguing the rest of the presentation is that so CDR and SRM, carbon dioxide removal or sunlight का reflection, those are very temporary fixes. रूट कॉज को कैसे डील करना है क्लाइमेट चेंज या एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज का के लिए, तो इसके लिए 4 मेजर पॉइंट्स इस प्रेजेंटेशन में मैं डिस्कस करूंगा अभी. अहिंसा, कर्मा, संन्यासा और विनय, ह्यूमिलिटी. So let's discuss those 4 ideas now. Climate engineering from the Indic ideas of karma, non-violence, renunciation, and humility. Both CDR and SRM can be justified as corrective actions to take care of the earlier mistakes. Right? IPCC's report suggests that many geoengineering techniques are a subset of mitigation, as mitigation involves both emission reductions and enhancing sinks, the latter of which is the aim of many CDRs. However, these corrective measures must be taken with an understanding of karmic consequences, renunciation, non-violence, and humility. One of the most widely known Indic ideas is karma. Although this word is often used in English to mean fortune or destiny, in Indic philosophical and religious traditions, it signifies the interconnectedness of the action with its consequences. In other words, our present is determined by our past actions, literally our past karmas, and our present actions determine our future. An activity intended to bring harm to self, others, or to nature in general will result in negative consequences for the actor of that karma. Indic philosophies connect karma with reincarnation. Our present existence and life cycle are the results of our past life, and we can help improve our future life journey by taking control of our present life. Ethical decisions can help choose us better actions and ensuring a spiritually and ethically progressive journey in the future. Because of this free will to choose our actions in the present moment, it is encouraged to cleanse even the past karmas by taking control of the present. By living a life in harmony with nature, we can help improve our karma for the future. Indic ethics rooted in the ideas of karma and reincarnation would advocate that we should remove the demon of greenhouse gas emission, but the new action of this removal should not cause further negative consequences. We should minimize any side effects or aftermaths of such geoengineering measures. For instance, for the prevention of greenhouse gas emissions, windmills are generally welcomed by opponents of fossil fuels. However, ornithologists have found this supposedly eco-friendly measure to be one of the reasons for the near extinction of the state bird of Rajasthan in India. Windmills, पवन चक्की की बात कर रहा हूं मैं अभी, तो windmills are accused of such deaths of birds. बहुत सारे पक्षियों की मृत्यु हो गई है windmill से, पवन चक्की से राजस्थान में, right? So the designs of such turbines should design them in such a way that they cause the least damage to the local flora and fauna. Unless we take such consequences of geoengineering measures into consideration, we might continue to harm our environment, leading to more climate change. The best course of action should be the minimization of the destructive demonic forces in the first place. For instance, in addition to generating more energy by renewable sources, one of the biggest causes of energy and water consumption is the global meat industry. If we can reduce our meat consumption globally, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions that result from raising millions of livestock for human consumption. The next indic virtue that we need to consider is humility, vinay or vinamrita, regarding geoengineering measures. Unless we change our lifestyles by reducing our carbon footprint, more geoengineering corrective measures cannot restore our climate. The Hindu text Ishopanishad refers to this virtue by stating in its very first verse that every particle in the universe is divine. Several Hindu texts such as the Bhagavad Gita, Ishopanishad, and Bhagavad Puran mention such ideas that inspire Hindus to revere every being as divine. As mentioned earlier, this extends to the Buddhist notion of the jewel net of Indra as well. This reverence for all manifests in Hindu reverence even for non-human animals, as exemplified by their devotion for holy cow, monkey god Hanuman, elephant god Ganesh, a rodent temple in Rajasthan, rituals for serpents, rivers, mountains, trees, seasons, and for earth and nature in general. Hindus can be called panentheistic because Hindus accept that the divinity is both immanent in the universe and is transcendental beyond the universe. Similarly, Hindus can be called polytheists because they recognize that the divinity manifests in infinite forms, and they can be called monists because many Hindus can explain one divine phenomenon that unifies all the countless manifestations. This spiritual unity with all universal beings leads to the virtue of vinaya or vinamrita, humility regarding them. It is this humility that inspires many Hindus to recite a Sanskrit verse to ask for forgiveness from Mother Earth for touching her with their feet as they wake up in the morning. Hindu women tied sacred threads and hugged trees to protect them from being cut even in the 18th century, long before the rest of the world coined such terms as biodiversity or climate change. I'm talking about the Bishnoi women who saved their khejurli trees in Rajasthan, or Chipko women who saved their Himalayan trees in the 1970s by women, ecofeminism in action. The Indic idea of reincarnation or punarjanam further reminds Indians to recognize all species as family members because each soul can get reborn as any species in its journey through multiple life cycles. A book-length study by Framerin explains this direct moral standing of plants and animals. Out of humility toward our fellow creatures, Indic traditions teach us to adopt ahimsa, non-violence, and practice vegetarianism, shakahar. Many Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists are 100% vegetarians. That is, they never consume egg, meat, or seafood. Some Hindus might take an occasional non-vegetarian dish, but their staple diet mostly consists of grains, lentils, fruits, and vegetables. This low preference for meat-based food in Indic communities continue to keep India's carbon footprint much smaller than counterparts like China or Brazil or United States or European countries. Compared to the United States or other European countries, India's per capita carbon footprint is even less due to Indians' sustainable food habits. As a manifestation of reverence, humility, and nonviolence for all beings, the latest research continues to show that animal farming accounts for 15% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide, one of the leading causes of climate change and deforestation. The Indian diaspora in North America, Europe, and Asia can be a global advocate for vegetarian diet choices that are urgently needed to save our planet. Another Indic idea, sannyasa or renunciation, discourages accumulation and possession of natural resources and encourages modest and straightforward living. Well-known teachings from the Hindu text Ishopanishad, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha, urges people to consume natural resources with a sense of renunciation instead of a sense of entitlement or ownership. One of the pioneering Indian environmental leaders, Sundarlal Bahuguna, inspired many Hindus by his modest lifestyle. He is still with us, Sundarlal Bahuguna, in Dehradun, and still a role model for the environmentalists in India and elsewhere. Right? So he was following his role model, Mahatma Gandhi. Bahuguna follows Gandhi's example. With the wide-scale practice of nonviolence and renunciation, we can become better stewards of our planet, climate, and other natural resources. Unfortunately, even with the slow reduction of meat consumption in the United States over the past few decades, that country continues to be a world leader in meat consumption. It also continues to exempt its meat industry from submitting annual emission reports, unlike all other sectors. The United States now should lead by practicing humility by incorporating nonviolence and renunciation if it is serious about mitigating climate change. This humility will supplement and complement geoengineering strategies by limiting greenhouse gas emissions, as mentioned earlier. The last significant quality that is mentioned is justice. Jainism, another ancient religious tradition of India. Let's discuss a little bit of Jainism now. With a long history of interaction with Hinduism and Buddhism, brings a distinct perspective in terms of justice for animals. According to the Jain taxonomy, all five sense beings are equal. Right? So in this taxonomy, if you take a look at this presentation now, so earth, water, fire, air, and Nigoda and plants are all equal. They are all one sensed only. If you look at the last line here, birds, reptiles, mammals, humans, gods, and demons are all equal. So to kill a chicken, or to kill a goat, to kill a cat, or to kill a cow, to kill a goat, to kill a sheep is equal to killing a human being, according to this Jain taxonomy. So that is why Jains have continued to be vegetarians for more than almost 3 millennia, at least around 3 millennia. So how do they live? They live by minimum use of earth, minimum use of water, minimum use of fire, air, or plant. So even within plant, only consume a byproduct of a plant instead of killing the entire plant. So that is a Jain idea of non-violence, Jain idea of consumption of natural resources. So hence, to kill a mammal or a bird is similar to karmic consequence to killing a human being. For human survival, only minimum consumption of one sense beings is recommended. And they are earth, water, fire, air, and plants. Among plants, consuming the root or stem of a plant is again unjustifiable from the Jain perspective, because that would be tantamount to killing an entire plant. So many Jains will not eat a potato, आलू नहीं खाएंगे, प्याज नहीं खाएंगे, बैंगन या गाजर या मूली ये सब नहीं खाएंगे, क्योंकि वो जड़ है. जड़ को आप नहीं खा सकते, क्योंकि जड़ आप जब खा रहे हैं किसी प्लांट की, किसी पौधे की, तो पूरे पौधे की हत्या कर रहे हैं. तो वो अहिंसा है पौधों के प्रति भी. मतलब मिनिमम से कम हिंसा हो पृथ्वी के प्रति, जल के प्रति, अग्नि के प्रति, वायु के प्रति और इवन पौधों के प्रति. ये है अहिंसा का एक अल्टीमेट फिलॉसफी और प्रैक्टिस अहिंसा की, जो हम देखते हैं जैन कम्युनिटी में. Only the byproduct of a plant are to be consumed by humans for their survival, in addition to minimal usage of earth, fire, air, and water. These ideas influenced Hindus more than 2 millennia ago, and they embraced vegetarianism and reduced their meat consumption. Today, several sects of Hinduism represent some of the largest communities of vegetarians in the world. As mentioned earlier, avoidance of meat ensures minimal use of natural resources, enabling environmental justice in the use of these natural resources. Overall, this will further reduce greenhouse gas emission and mitigate climate change. Long before we heard terms such as climate change, Mahatma Gandhi, let me see if I have a slide for, yes, okay, Gandhiji. So Mahatma Gandhi developed his ideas based on Indic virtues of Satya, Ahimsa, Aparigraha, Brahmacharya, Purusharth, Upvas, etc. Even today, Gandhi remains a global icon of these Indic virtues, as exemplified by his small vegetarian diet. So all he would eat is very, very small vegetarian diet, probably some chane or some little bit of yogurt, but very small diet he would eat. So he was an example, or he was a statement by his life itself for environmentalism, for Shakahar, for vegetarianism and whatnot. Right? His yogic practices, his silence vows, his compassion for small animals, his self-reliance in making his own cloth, charkha chalate the, by spinning his wheel, his avoidance of waste. These are the ideals that actually inspired and led Indians against injustice in India, led by Gandhi and Sundarlal Bahuguna, South Africa, led by Gandhi and later Nelson Mandela, and the United States, led by Dr. Martin Luther King, who visited Gandhi's home in India and launched the US civil rights movement based on non-violence that changed America forever, still changing America. Now comparing Hindu perspectives with Buddhism now a little bit also. Let's discuss a little bit more of Buddhism now. This presentation attempts to assess climate engineering from a Hindu perspective. As already noted elsewhere in this article, Hinduism shared many ideas with Buddhism and Jainism. Buddhist doctrines are based on a non-dualistic and non-hierarchical worldview in which humans and nature are not two separate opposing or rival forces or domains, but are mutually dependent and interconnected. This worldview is identical to the Hindu worldview. The Hindu doctrine of Brahman is also a non-dual phenomenon like the Buddhist doctrine of Anatman, no self, right? And both Brahman and Anatman pervade, unite, and connect humans with nature. Buddhism also teaches that our sufferings are due to our desires, and practicing the Eightfold Path can help control them. Many Hindus would agree that the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali contains a similar disciplinary way, also with 8 limbs, with identical practices of regulating one's mind, speech, and body. Jainism also has rigorous methods to discipline one's mind, body, and speech. Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism teach that a disciplined life based on the disciplined body, mind, and speech can help avoid environmentally harmful practices. The resultant understanding can develop human society that is respectful and reverent towards nature. Also, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism emphasize nonviolence and compassion towards other animals that manifest in many Jain and Buddhists also practicing vegetarianism like their Hindu counterparts. Karma is another fundamental idea common to Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, and all three teach that any climate engineering related action that is to be taken to mitigate climate change must be analyzed first for its motivation and intention. It is the motivation and purpose that will determine the future consequence of such action, as we saw earlier in this article also. Okay, let's see. So in general, CDR seems preferable than SRM because the latter intends to modify the environment with human actions, whereas the former is about cleaning up the residual toxins on the planet. From the karmic perspective in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, solar radiation management seems to start a new chain of karmic action and consequences, while carbon dioxide removal is about dealing with the results of prior karmic actions. So in conclusion, ethical issues about geoengineering or climate engineering are not too different, and we need to keep the same concerns in mind as we prepare for the future. For instance, geoengineering technology should not fall into the wrong hands, lest the karmic consequences will haunt us for the next several generations. We need to practice humility or vinamrata or vinay and sensitivity to the needs and practices of local communities of humans as well as flora and fauna. We need to be fair and balanced to nature itself as we evolve newer technologies to protect and preserve the environment for future generations using carbon dioxide removal and solar radiation management strategies. Indic ethical ideas based on Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain texts and contexts can inspire us to be more responsible, sustainable, and moral to protect and preserve our planet and nature. They can prevent geoengineering technologies from becoming yet another lost chance to save our precious world. So that completes my presentation, Karuna, and yeah. So now let's take any questions, and I'll stop sharing and take your questions.
Professor Jain, for a very enlightening talk.
Thank you.
So are there any questions? Or may I start? Are there any questions? Okay, so let me start with mine, and there is a question in the box. We can ask you that next.
Sure.
So I have two questions actually. My first question is regarding, now that we are bringing, and this is a question that I've worked extensively myself in environment and Buddhism. It's a question that keeps coming up over and over again, and it's related to anachronism. We are pulling out ideas that belong to this context of the life we are living right now, and we are taking it back 2,500 years. So is there a problem with comparisons? That's my first problem. And the second one is concerning, you've talked quite a lot about meat eating, and I completely agree with you. But my question is that Hinduism, apart from promoting some positive ideas, also has a lot of negative ideas, because one sees, for instance, in the Ramayana, you mentioned the Mahabharata, wonderful example though from the Mahabharata. But when you look at the Ramayana, it's full of instances of hunting, right? When you look at the Vedas, full of instances of sacrifice of animals. So I just want to know how, whether Hinduism, one has to look at the religion fully, as opposed to, so where would you place these ideas, and how would you tackle these ideas? How would you address these ideas? So that's my question.
Right. Yeah. So, yes, so nothing should be taken out of context, right? So what are the ways or ideas that we can take from Hinduism, Buddhism, or Jainism that are still working, or that can potentially work to save whatever remaining forests or flora and fauna that we have in our midst, right? So I just returned from Bihar, I just returned from Gujarat. I've been sort of discovering India for the last 20 years. So wherever I've gone, for example, when I go to Gir Lion National Forest that we have, right? What we find there, or when my first book, like as you know, Professor Sani, in my first book, I have dealt with Bishnoi community. So when I went to Bishnoi community in Rajasthan, when I go to Gir Lion National Park in Gujarat, or if we go, I have not been yet to Kanha Forest in Madhya Pradesh, or Sundarbans in Bengal. I would love to go there also. But so what we find in these communities, wherever we find forests or flora and fauna in India especially, what we find is that humans have been living, still living. It's not a thing of 2000 years back. आज भी ये सच्चाई है, स्टूडेंट्स के लिए मैं थोड़ा हिंदी मिक्स कर रहा हूँ, आज भी शायद ये सच्चाई है कि जहाँ जहाँ भी हमारे जंगल हैं या लायंस हैं या टाइगर्स हैं, राइट, या कोई भी वन्य प्राणी हैं, वहाँ हम पाते हैं कि इस तरह से ह्यूमंस रह रहे हैं, मनुष्य मानव समाज भारत का इस तरह से आज भी रह रहा है भारत में कि वो वन्य प्राणियों के लिए या वृक्षों के लिए उतना बड़ा खतरा नहीं है जितना जो हुआ अमेरिका में। तो अमेरिका भी 25 साल रह के आया हूं, तो वो जहां जो मैंने अमेरिका में देखा वो ये है कि जंगल के जंगल साफ, क्लीन, एकदम बिल्कुल क्लीन। और अगर साउथ अमेरिका में, जहां मैं नहीं गया हूं, लेकिन साउथ अमेरिका में बहुत सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज और रिपोर्ट से ये साबित हो चुका है, साबित हो रहा है, एवरीडे न्यू रिपोर्ट्स कम, कि अमेजोनियन फॉरेस्ट, ट्रॉपिकल फॉरेस्ट आर बीइंग वाइप्ड आउट। व्हाई? बिकॉज those forests are being replaced by farms, right? Agricultural farms. Why? उस farms में that food is not being grown for human consumption. The food that is being grown at the cost of Amazonian forests is the food that will go to cattle, because humans need more beef in Europe and America. Beef की जो addiction है, beef addiction के लिए they need more food for cattle. That food for cattle is coming at the cost of the lungs of our planet. That is the tropical forest. It is a huge, huge karmic consequences for the health of planet Earth and health of human bodies. Beef, red meat especially, is one of the most damaging things that humans are doing to the planet Earth's health and our own health. So that is what, when I wrote that article, I was still in America, so I was writing as if my audience is Americans. India's issues are quite different. हमारे जंगल जो, कमिंग टू इंडिया नाउ, बैक टू इंडिया नाउ, तो हमारे जंगल जो, अगर हम गिर के जंगल में जाएं, हम पाते हैं कि मालधारी कम्युनिटी लायंस के साथ आज भी रह रही है। तो वो कैसे संभव हो रहा है? सुंदरबंस में अगर हम जाएं, अगर जो मैंने सुना है, जहां तक मैंने सुना है, आई होप आई एम राइट, आई हैव नॉट बीन देयर, बट व्हाट आई हैव हर्ड इज दैट बॉर्न बीबी, बंगाली वर्ड है ना, वन से बॉर्न हो गया, वन का बॉर्न, बीबी मतलब बेगम या देवी, राइट? बॉर्न बीबी इज अ बंगाली वर्ड फॉर फॉरेस्ट गॉडेस। बॉर्न फॉरेस्ट, बीबी गॉडेस। बॉर्न बीबी को मानते हैं, जंगल में बॉर्न बीबी है तो जंगल को नहीं काटना है। वहां के टाइगर, मैन हंटिंग टाइगर भी है, कैनिबल्स भी है, टाइगर मतलब मनुष्यों को भी मार, लेकिन फिर भी टाइगर के साथ आज भी मनुष्य रह रहे हैं, ह्यूमंस रह रहे हैं सुंदरबंस में। कान्हा में इसी तरह से आदिवासी रह रहे हैं। बिश्नोई कम्युनिटी फ्लोरा एंड फौना के साथ आज भी रह रहे हैं। तो ये क्यों, कैसे संभव हुआ? कुछ तो बात है, इफ आई कोट इकबाल हियर, कुछ तो बात है कि तो बात है कि हस्ती हमारे लायंस की, टाइगर्स की, राइनोसरस, कैन यू इमेजिन 1.5 बिलियन पीपल हमारे इंडिया में हैं। इंडिया इज द ओनली कंट्री इन द वर्ल्ड दैट हैज राइनोसरस, टाइगर्स, एलिफेंट्स एंड लायंस। नो कंट्री इन द प्लैनेट, नो कंट्री ऑन द प्लैनेट एक्सेप्ट अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज, जहां इतनी ह्यूमन डेंसिटी के बावजूद इतने सारे रेयर स्पीशीज ऑफ फ्लोरा एंड फौना हमारे यहाँ आज भी है। उसका कुछ तो कारण होगा कि हमारी कुछ फितरत ही ऐसी है कि बिना वन्य प्राणियों को हिंसा पहुंचाए, उनको तंग किए, परेशान किए, मारे, हम जी सकते हैं। हम दाल चावल रोटी से जी सकते हैं। ऐसा नहीं कि हमको दिन में 3 बार हमको मांस मीट चाहिए ही चाहिए, ऐसा नहीं है, आज भी नहीं है। जबकि ऐसा है विदेशों में, दिन में 3 बार मीट चाहिए उनको। तो ये कुछ बातें थी। हाँ, मैं ये मानता हूं कि हिंसा के उदाहरण बहुत सारे वेदों में भी है, रामायण में भी है, महाभारत में। मैं नहीं कह रहा हूं कि सब कुछ अच्छा ही है, लेकिन उसमें से कौन सी ऐसी बातें हैं जो आज भी हमारे फ्लोरा एंड फौना को बचाने में हेल्प कर रही है? So based on anthropological work, based on the field work or discovery of India trips, based on that field work, based on the communities that I've studied in my research, is what I've shared. कि क्या कौन सी बातें हैं जो आज भी लागू हो सकती हैं और लागू और होनी चाहिए, और ज्यादा ऐसा नहीं हो कि हम जो बचा पाए अब तक हमारे लायंस और राइनोसरस और एलिफेंट्स और टाइगर्स को, ऐसा नहीं हो कि हम खो दें उनको। तो ये जस्ट रिमाइंडर है, मुझे भी और आप सभी, हम सभी के लिए रिमाइंडर है कि हमको आज भी ये सब चीजें बचा के रखनी है। और इनके बिना कोई, देयर इज नो अल्टरनेटिव विदाउट reducing our meat consumption. There is no alternative to sustaining the earth. Without reducing our consumption, there is no alternative to reducing the earth. If we continue to have this addiction for meat, we will have more and more pandemics. उसके बिना चारा ही नहीं ना, उपाय ही नहीं शाकाहार के बिना या वीगनिज्म के बिना, उसका कंजम्पशन को कम किए बिना उपाय क्या है? ये बात है। थोड़ा उत्तर ज्यादा लंबा हो गया। आई होप आई आंसर्ड योर क्वेश्चन।
No, you did, absolutely. Thank you so much. So we move on to, there's some questions here in the chat.
Sure.
From Kavita Singh, she asks, how could technology be a cause of removing the carbon emissions and greenhouse gases? Since the cause of climate change we are facing today is majorly caused by technology.
Right. So again, time बहुत कम था, लेकिन अगर आपने slides, if you looked at the slides, right, couple of slides I had in which I was showing the solar radiation management. So global warming is to be reduced, right? So let's stop the heat before it reaches the earth. Right? So in that, technology is helping. What they're promising is to have these huge reflectors across the Sahara Desert, for example, or across all the roofs. If you put huge reflectors, maybe that solar radiation can be reflected back to the atmosphere instead of reaching our oceans, or instead of causing our Arctic or Antarctica to melt further. Because as they melt more and more, it will increase our floods and cyclones and hurricanes and whatnot. So the technology is being deployed. That is the discussion. That is what is climate engineering basically. So deploying technology to deal with climate change, right? So all these technologies, but when we talk of technology, it always comes with karmic side effects. So how do we reduce those karmic side effects was the whole paper about. So what I argue in this paper is that instead of solar radiation management, injecting these chemicals or deploying these reflectors, let's talk more on CDR, carbon dioxide removal, because that involves more afforestation, reforestation. So by that we can capture the CO2. Hopefully that will have much less negative karmic side effects for the planet Earth. That is what I try to argue in this paper. So उसके लिए भी technology है. Again, carbon dioxide capturing के लिए भी अलग-अलग technologies हैं. But I think the best way would be to have more and more trees, which we are already doing. In India, it's all about growing more trees around highways, in the schools. There are many projects. I heard very less such projects in the US. कि भाई आज पेड़ लगाएंगे, वृक्षारोपण का महोत्सव करेंगे या कुछ उत्सव मनाएंगे, वो बहुत कम होता है. हमारे यहाँ फिर भी होता है, लेकिन और ज्यादा करना है. ऐसा नहीं है कि भूल जाएं हम. उनको वृक्ष और भी लगाने हैं, और exotic trees नहीं लगाने हैं. जो indigenous trees हैं, local trees हैं, उनको लगाना है. I hope that answers your question. Yes.
Hello. Ma'am, can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yes. Please go ahead.
Sure. Good.
Hello, sir. Firstly, I really enjoyed your lecture, and since I'm working on similarly the same topic, I really enjoyed. It's not even like a question; it's more like something that I like to listen your opinion about. Because when we are talking about climate change, which is such a global issue, and when we see that globally people are moving away somewhere or the other away from religion. Okay, there are certain good things in the religion, of course. There are certain bad things in the religion, of course. But still, the urban population is somewhere or the other moving away from religion as such. So when we are talking about a global issue, providing a solution with a localized religious view, how sustainable would it be at the global level? Shouldn't we come up with a sort of a cosmopolitan view of tackling this issue rather than going back to the religion, where virtues like humility and believing that every particle has a divine aspect to it? I hardly believe that even people in India, where Hinduism is so prevalent, in whatever form it is still prevalent, practically how many people believe it to be the case? Given all the disputes that are there between people from different castes, different religion, and all these stuff that is there, somewhere or the other emanating from the religion, when we extrapolate this same kind of an argument to the environment, how sustainable would it be in sort of tackling an issue which is expansive, global, international, and intergenerational at the same time? So, I wanted to listen your views on the.
Sure. Yes. So in the beginning of my talk, actually, again, I went pretty too fast, but
yeah.
In the beginning, what I was trying to discuss was that despite so many sects within Hinduism, right? So many castes and sects and classes and languages, whatnot. I think there are some key ideas that I think hopefully everybody can agree upon, right? So first idea that I talked about was the reverence for nature. That is, I don't think any Hindu would deny that earth is to be revered, right? Or water is to be revered. I would, at least by belief, they would agree, I hope, Right? That was the first idea, reverence for nature. Second idea that I talked about was dharma. Dharma, I even said that all languages of India has this word dharma, and almost all language. I actually did a survey when I was living in North Carolina. I actually went and asked a Tamil person, Telugu person, Kannada person, Bengali person. Everybody agreed, yes, dharma word exists in our language, or almost like dharma word. I think Tamil was the only exception where they said धर्मा वर्ड नहीं है, लेकिन उससे एकदम मिलता जुलता ये वर्ड अभी मैं भूल रहा हूँ, लेकिन almost every 99% people of all states, all languages agreed that dharma word exists in all of Malayalam and everywhere. Marathi, of course, there is word. So dharma word अगर है हर भाषा में, उसका मीनिंग भी है हर भाषा में, उसकी कॉन्शियसनेस भी है, हर सबके दिमाग में है. उसको जगाने की जरूरत है, उसको रिमाइंड कराने की जरूरत है, और उसको और ज्यादा से ज्यादा हम डिस्कस करें, स्पेशली स्टूडेंट्स एंड टीचर्स. अगर हम इन वैल्यूज को समझें, इन शब्दों को समझें और उसको आज के हालात से कनेक्ट करें, धर्म को, कर्म का आइडिया, कर्म शब्द तो सभी भाषाओं में, सभी, इवन इंग्लिश में भी, इंग्लिश में एक्चुअली धर्म और कर्म दोनों ऑफिशियल, ऑक्सफोर्ड डिक्शनरी में धर्म और कर्म दोनों वर्ड ऑफिशियल, इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज में भी अब तो है, इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस में तो है ही है, इंग्लिश में भी आ गया है वर्ड. तो अगर वर्ड्स हैं तो वर्ड्स के मीनिंग भी तो होने चाहिए ना. वर्ड्स के मीनिंग को हमको समझना पड़ेगा. विल हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड, रिमाइंड आवरसेल्व्स व्हाट आर द मीनिंग्स and how can we connect these meanings with global issues such as climate change and environmental issues. So idea is not to force religion onto the world. Idea is to take these values and try to interpret these values to help solve some of the world's problems. Okay, now talk about the universalism. I think you asked about universalism. So when freedom or democracy or equality are universally forced upon European countries, especially US and UK colonialism and new colonialism, those values are being pushed across the world, and which are good values. I'm not against those. If those values can be universally accepted and to be pushed further and further, why can't we also share the Indic ideas or Indic values or Indic terms such as ahimsa, non-violence? What's wrong with that? Non-violence towards everybody, non-violence towards me, non-violence towards my family, towards my community, towards my animals, towards my plants, towards flora and fauna, everybody. That is the Indic ideas or Indic. Somebody was discussing, कल एक दो दिन पहले कहाँ कोई बात हो रही थी, भारत विश्व गुरु है, भारत विश्व गुरु था, तो किसी ने पूछा, अरे भारत विश्व गुरु है तो क्या है भारत के पास देने के लिए दुनिया को? तो क्या अहिंसा हो सकती है? विश्व गुरु छोड़ो उसको, लेकिन ये एक वैल्यू क्या हम ले सकते हैं? अहिंसा एज अ सोल्यूशन टू communal tensions, ahimsa as a solution to environmental issues. Can we think about these things, right? So ahimsa, dharma, and karma. Again, remove them. I mean, to make it simplified, to make it universalized, we may have to decouple these terms from their religious, ritualistic aspects, but just take the philosophical values. These are also philosophical values, right? Dharma is a philosophical term, not just a ritualistic term. Karma is a philosophical term, not just a ritualistic term. So these philosophical values, philosophical terms, if we connect them, if we try to connect them and try to understand them from these global issues, I think we have some hope that we can try to save the remaining whatever flora and fauna that we still have. As I said in my response to Professor Sahni's question, I think we can do something about these environmental resources that we still have. All right, next.
Any other questions? Students? Tony, go ahead.
Sir, could you say about cremation and burning the bodies, right? In most of the religions, we burn the dead bodies. So that also consumes lots of.
अगर आप वीडियो ऑन रखिएगा तो अच्छा रहेगा. हम तो वीडियो ऑन करके बैठे हैं, प्रोफेसर सानी और मैं, और आप तो वीडियो ऑफ करके बैठे हैं. ये तो अच्छी बात नहीं है. अगर ऑन कर सके तो अच्छी बात नहीं. ओके, अदरवाइज फाइन. पूछिए. बुधन सिंह सिंकू, हाँ पूछिए. हाँ ये बात बोलिए.
Most of the religions practice burning the dead bodies, cremation, no? So would you say about this, how it will, if we can, instead of burning the bodies, we can directly bury the bodies like most of the religions do. And could you say about something?
Right. That's a great question. I think दोनों के पॉजिटिव नेगेटिव, आई थिंक अगर दोनों के नेगेटिव सोचूं मैंने बहुत ज्यादा सोचा नहीं इस बारे में, लेकिन अगर हम सब सोचें साथ में, तो cremation has negative consequences also because we are burning trees, right? Maybe we are cutting trees to do more cremations, so that is of course negative consequences. But burial के भी अपने negative consequences because we run out of space. कितनी space चाहिए? Millions and millions of bodies if we keep burying, करते रहेंगे, दफनाते जाएंगे, तो उसके लिए कितनी जमीन चाहिए? जमीन की तो कमी है ऑलरेडी भारत में, स्पेशली भारत में. तो दोनों के नेगेटिव कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस हैं. आई थिंक द सॉल्यूशन कैन बी इलेक्ट्रिक क्रेमेशन, व्हिच इज हैपनिंग मोर एंड मोर इन अमेरिका, राइट? इलेक्ट्रिकल क्रेमेशन सिस्टम प्रोसेस जो होता है, उसमें मिनिमाइजिंग द ग्रीन वुड, पेड़ों की लकड़ियां जलाने की बजाय बिजली से जो शवदाह होने लगा है अमेरिका में स्पेशली. मुझे पता नहीं भारत में भी होता है कि नहीं, और शायद वो एक सॉल्यूशन होगा. लेकिन अच्छी बात यह है कि अमेरिका क्रिश्चियंस, लॉट ऑफ क्रिश्चियंस आर आल्सो instead of going for burial, they are also adopting electric cremation in America also. I think that may be probably the solution for India also going forward.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, please.
Saloni, you had a question? Saloni?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was actually speaking and I didn't realize that my mic didn't unmute.
No, go ahead now.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wanted to, it's more of an insight actually. So during this pandemic slash lockdown, I've sort of taken up gardening, and while I am nurturing a lot of plants and they are giving me, like, they are growing healthily, I also realize the amount of labor that goes into, nurturing them, bringing them to life. In fact, in even listening or seeing how they respond to various ways of taking care of them. So this is also something that I noticed in the West. I guess they are taking a lot of indoor plants these days. And while that is not like afforestation, of course, but they sort of have this, I don't know, responsibility coming from within, right? So what if we could, come up with ways of educating more and more people about, the joys or the virtues of, nurturing the soil, giving back to the soil. There's things like composting and making bioenzymes that actually give back to nature in just as much or even more than how much we have like destroyed.
Yes, definitely. I think that's a great idea. Composting and afforestation, reforestation is one of the only ways to save whatever greenery that we can have and save and protect. And yes, and so I guess the only care that is to be needed in these efforts is to not use more chemical fertilizers or chemical pesticides, right? And to use local plants instead of planting exotic outsider plants, and also go for traditional kind of farming. Whereas, for example, for my second book, for example, in Uttarakhand, what they're trying to do is to revive the traditional farming. Whereas in a single farm, let's have some urad ki dal, some gehu, some all kinds of diverse grains instead of monoculture, which has been happening in the name of green revolution, Harit Kranti, especially in Punjab and America and other countries. But Punjab was the biggest victim of the green revolution. What we did is we went for monoculture, only gehu, only wheat. That really destroyed our soil. That led to now all kinds of problems in Punjab that some of the glimpses you saw in the film Urtha Punjab, for example. But that is all the consequences of the green revolution, that is monoculture. That we have to be careful about. So afforestation should be done with all these care, then I think it will be great. With more and more organic farming, composting, like you mentioned, and so on. Yes, good. Next.
Any other questions, students? Well, that seems to be about it, Professor Jain.
All right.
But that's a good thing because students must be very satisfied with what you have spoken.
I hope.
And we thank you so much on behalf of the Department of Philosophy to to be here to share your valuable ideas with us. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you back again for another talk, but actually in person. We are all keeping our fingers crossed about the pandemic.
Yes.
And we hope that you can come and visit otherwise.
Yes, thank you.
It will be lovely to have you. Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, students. So that is it. And until next